Versha is senior correspondent and managing editor at NowThis. She oversees context and feature video production on social and political issues, as well as a little pop culture. And Versha has issued President Barack Obama, is that right?
That's right.
And has President Trump answered your request yet?
He has not.
All right.
Silence.
Versha has 8 years of experience in digital media, from political reporting to social strategy, and I will let Versha take it from here. Versha?
Thanks, Trevor. Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. Thank you for coming. So I'm Versha, and I've been covering U.S. and international politics for almost 10 years now. A little more than that if you count my nerdy college political science days. But thinking back to that time when I was sort of a young, hopeful, budding political journalist, I truly never thought that my future in political journalism would mean covering a president who throws paper towels at hurricane survivors. But that is the reality that we live in today. My favorite sessions at ONA so far, and pretty much every year, involve real talk. So this panel is going to involve a lot of real talk. Let's be honest, we live in an objectively weird time. It's not about politics, it's not coming from a partisan standpoint. It is weird to be living in a time where our president is a reality TV star with no elected experience, who also has no filter. It is objectively weird. I don't know, how many of you actually learned the word dotard from Kim Jong-un? Like, I didn't know what that word was until he issued that.
I knew it.
Yes, the one man on the panel, watch out for him. So,
we will replace you.
That's right.
2 minutes.
He lasted 2 minutes.
Got my FaceTime, though.
But I truly do believe that comedy and satire is one of the, if not the sharpest, clearest, most therapeutic way that we can deal with a time as crazy and insane as the one we're living in. So I have assembled a panel of some of my favorite voices in this space. Matt is a digital producer for The Daily Show. Melinda is a writer for Full Frontal with Samantha B, and they just won an Emmy the other night. And Francesca is a senior presenter and host of NewsBroke, which is AJ Plus's comedy series. New videos every Friday on YouTube, so you guys can. So in the interest of saving time, we're not going to play video clips from all of these fabulous shows, but I'm sure you're familiar. I will be tweeting some of the ones that we're referencing later on anyway. And also, of course, we want to save time for audience questions, so that will happen at the end. But to get started, when was the point where you realized that straight news reporting was not necessarily the way for you to cover President Trump? And Matt, I'd like to hear from you, because he was actually a politics reporter and producer for Bloomberg during the election, and now you're at The Daily Show.
Bloomberg News, yeah. When was the moment that I...
If there was a moment, or what was the journey?
There were a series of horrible moments. At some point during the campaign, when it became really clear that Trump was just a liar, and a lot of news organizations were not okay with calling him a liar. I think that was the first, that was probably the moment when it's like, if you can't be honest about this, then how can you honestly cover a candidate who wants to be president when he's lying every day? I think it's weird that as a journalist, I remember being in journalism school and my professors were like, we are slaves to the truth, and you must find the truth. That is our noble cause. And now it feels like journalism is like restricting that almost, because we can't be totally honest about who Trump is. So at some point during the campaign, I think that's when I...
And you started to make comedic videos for Bloomberg News. I remember some of them, they were great. What was the journey from becoming that kind of producer to ending up as a digital producer for The Daily Show?
A lot of it was Trump-driven because he's so naturally funny and stupid. So we live in the golden age of mashups right now, I feel like. And CNN is doing mashups, which is hilarious. And it's a mashup of Trump, and it's like all the times Trump says, China or whatever.
Puerto Rico,
yeah.
Yes.
So that's really funny. And when you put them together, it's very funny. And so I guess you do that enough times, and it's like, yeah, I can see why this is really enjoyable.
And Francesca, you did some kind of more straight election reporting during the campaigns, and then you started to also venture into more comedy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment was covering the RNC when it was this is a fringe circus. I don't know if I'm sure a lot of you were there, and it was like, there is no other way to cover this than the fringe circus that it is. And as news broke, we launched right after that with our sketch, White Fragility in the Workplace. You might have seen that. You might have, yeah, thank you. Others have some homework to do. That's fine, I forgive you. And you know, so one of the pieces we did was trying to get never Trump candidates, because there were some who were like, anyone but Trump, and we were like staking them out, and we were trying to lead them by the hand to a safe space, and like blink twice if you're safe right now, you know. So they were like, Ted Cruz, you know, and like, what would you do to help Trump not win this nomination? Would you turn your home into a Pokemon gym, you know, what is it? So, I mean, I think to me, the moment to cover Trump from a comedic angle was the moment he announced his candidacy. And I think that the Huffington Post really got it right. They covered him in entertainment, and he should have remained there. And I mean, you know, say what we will about the Huff Post, they're always looking to make something entertainment, I get it, but this was the one to do it. So I think when you have sort of a failed hack comic as a president, there is no other way. You can't push him back into a box of normalcy. Like, you know, we're laying into him.
Well, I do want to make the point that a lot of people are actually critical of the HuffPost decision to do that, because so many people treated him as a joke early on that they did not take his candidacy seriously. And then you fast forward 18 months later, whatever it is, and actually he became president by a very narrow margin that affected the Electoral College. So I think there is some legitimacy in the idea that news organizations have to be careful with how they classify him, but it doesn't mean that they can't be creative in the ways that they cover him. So Melinda, you had said that the election was a wake-up call in many ways, which it was for a lot of people. What was it like in the full Frontal writers' room?
So we had to write a show that night, and I think a lot of people threw up. Like, it was really, really hard to be sitting there at 1 a.m. and trying to be funny. Comedy writers are not like pillars of strength in the best of circumstances. Like, we're weird, neurotic little balls of shyness and anxiety. And so we're not like super equipped to handle this stuff at the best of times. And when this was not the best of times. And so I was sitting there writing my script, also IMing with my sisters, trying to convince my older sister to move out of the country, and trying to convince my younger sister to come give me a hug. She's like, no, I'm going to bed. And one of the other writers sitting next to me in the next cubicle was just like half writing his script, half looking at real estate in Canada. We're natural pessimists, and that night I think it really like spiked. Our show started February of 2016, so we were covering the election, but we thought, like everybody, we thought he was going to lose. We had loose plans for what we were going to do that night if he won, but we had basically written a Hillary show. So we were completely thrown for a loop, not just that night, but it just became a really different job than what we thought we were going to be doing. A big part of that show was going to be a celebration of not having to cover Trump anymore, and then we woke up the next day and realized, like, oh, this is our job forever.
You know what AJ Plus did? I'm sorry to butt in on you.
Yeah.
So AJ Plus, which is where NewsBroke is based out of, we hired a mariachi band for that evening.
Oh.
To
And
celebrate.
that cheered you up?
No,
play 'em out.
before Trump lost. Excuse me.
Oh no!
Alternate reality.
We hired a mariachi band. I'm sorry, AJ Plus is in the room. I'm throwing us all under the bus. We hired a mariachi band to be like, this will be fun, you know, because like, F you, Trump. And they were consoling me by the end of the night. They were like, just like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, me too. Anyway, so yes.
Yeah, so it's a different job than we thought it would be. We drink more.
So what are some tips that you guys might have for news organizations who might want to filter some of the absurdity we're seeing through a more comedic lens? We're seeing Washington Post, I think, has launched a comedy video series in politics. At NowThis Politics, we do a lot of straight video reporting and coverage of what's happening on the Hill every day, but we also do op-eds with comedic scripts. We also do occasional sketches. So do you have advice for like how to pivot? Since you two in
my advice
particular?
would be stay in your lane.
There's enough competition out there as it is. Here are my ideas for the next 10 videos I'm gonna do.
Yes.
I'm just gonna give them to you for free.
If you're
Gotcha question,
If you're
Marsha.
not aware, Matt is the guy behind all of the genius Sean Spicer videos
Oh,
that you
pour
have
one out
seen
for Sean Spicer, man.
Yeah, that's Matt.
If Spicer's here, I'd love to interview him,
So
actually.
how are you coping since
It's
he's
fine.
been
It's
gone?
been a while.
Yeah.
You go through the peaks and valleys of grief, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah.
I did an interview with the BBC the day after he resigned, and it was like a radio interview. And they were like, "Are you seeing therapists?" And I was like, "That's a really good idea because I don't know what to do anymore." I used to watch all his briefings every day.
Yeah.
So fun.
It was a simpler time,
Do
kind
you
of.
think he's seeing a therapist right now?
What kind of therapist would take that job?
Don't.
Like, Sean Spicer, that's not, I can't handle that.
Can't help you.
The layers you would have to unpack there before you get to the morsel of
Like
how
how many
horrible
sessions
he
of
is.
crying
Do
would
you
you have to
think
go
that you
through
have-
before
you
he
have
actually
to, like,
utters a
apply
sentence?
to get a therapist?
I mean, at that point, therapists are people too. You know, they.
Go ahead.
No,
I'm
they're
just
not.
saying.
Anyway, no. Let's back to journalism. No, I would just say honestly to hire comedy writers and to hire joke writers. The only people more starved for work are comedians than journalists are comics, and there's a lot of them out there. They know how to write well, and don't be like, well, Bob is funny. Remember that one joke? Like, no, like hire people who write jokes for a living, and there's a lot of us out there, and they can really add to your team, and they don't have to take away from the integrity of your work. I think NewsBroke really does try to have an added value of some type of explainer video. There's a minute there where you're like, oh, there's a stat or two, and but then the payoff is, having whatever fart joke, or just buying a fart blaster, which we did. To talk about NAFTA, because of course. So I think it's not being afraid to cheapen your brands, so to speak. I think actually you're going to make it stronger, and I think especially when it comes to video, I think, and not having straight reporters. I think some of the best hypocrisies and nuances of this administration are pointed out by print journalists. Some of the best writers are in print, and they make you laugh out loud. And I think that is also the case with news comedy. Some of the best writers are now in news comedy. They're able to point out those nuances and those hypocrisies, and they're able to do it succinctly, and it's immediately more accessible. So I would just say kind of reinvesting in the strength of those writers and not worrying about it cheapening your brand, even if you might need to buy a fart blaster to achieve it.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that it's definitely true that that we're living in such an absurd time that there are things that you can kind of only say through comedy, and so I think that people right now have a bottomless appetite for being able to look at this stuff in a way that makes them laugh rather than cry. I think just one other piece of advice: people are extremely dumb. They will not know that things are jokes. You will get responses of the liberal media lies, Mitch McConnell's not a turtle.
We don't know. Check that birth certificate. We don't know. How can we know at this point?
So just be aware and clearly label it. We can say that. Mm-hmm. So what you guys are doing right now is really resonating. We're now in a time where late night talk show hosts are activists. Jimmy Kimmel has emerged as one of the most effective voices in the healthcare discussion. Why do you think there is this gap for you to fill, and/or what do you think are some of the failings of cable news or mainstream media that is allowing you to step in and fill this vacuum that is really engaging audiences?
Journalists have a hard time taking a position on things because they're supposed to be neutral, right? I mean, that's the whole point. But when an issue is like not, when it's not.
Yeah. Well, I think it's supposed to report the truth.
Sure.
It should be the core tenet.
I think it's hard for a lot of reporters to stay like privately to be like, yeah, both sides have a good point. When it's like one side is like climate change is a Chinese hoax, and we know that's not true,
right.
But they still have to say like, well, there's another side to this. And I think a lot of what we see on TV is like a horrible cable chatter about you have to have like Jeffrey Lord on one side to every other argument, even if the argument is just like a presentation of the facts.
Right.
So it's easier for someone like a late night host to say that's wrong and BS and this is the actual truth. I think it's a lot harder for journalists to do that. Although some do, like Jake Tapper does a pretty good job of every now and then like doing a really good fact check.
Yep.
But then he gets shit for it because it's like, you're a leftist. And he's not, I don't think.
Yeah.
I know Jake, if he's here, he can correct me. He's probably not here.
I think he's pretty clear about that on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just being anti-bullshit, but Trump is pro-bullshit. So if you're, it's like if you're a journalist and you're like, I stand for the truth, and Trump is like, well, I lie all the time and I'm against the truth, then technically you're against Trump if you're a journalist. So I don't know, I feel like embrace it. He's a liar. He's a liar. He's a stupid liar. Yeah. If you can't say he's a liar, then how? I don't know.
You guys are so objective. I didn't get an applause break.
Raise your hand if you think Trump is a liar. Every hand should be in the room. He posed as his own publicist and called.
He's lying. Okay. Yeah. He's lying. He's not a liar. Am I right? Yeah. Lying. Big difference.
It's so stupid.
It's an experiment, though.
I don't understand. Every hand should be in the room.
When you say that, he's not saying that exclusively because, as we know, a lot of politicians lie, if not every single politician. But there is something, the reason that we're here, the reason we're doing this panel, is that there's something different and unprecedented and absurd.
Obama wiretapped me. What the hell?
Yes.
But I think you know, news comedy is positioned, of course, to point out those absurdities. Yes. And I think that it is, in terms of cable news, where it. Okay, let me backtrack and just say that there is a danger, however, to overly focus on Trump. And I think the media did it before the election, and they continue to do it because we have a president who's pronouncing Puerto Rico in the most, I mean, honestly, pretty disrespectful way. I mean, that was complete disrespect, but you can't call it that. The news media says, he tries his hand at Spanish. Like, no, he tries his hand at mockery, and he does it all the time, right? But, so I think it's how can, the other danger is how can we all sort of avoid only making jokes about Trump and expanding. But I will say that the news media beforehand, you know, and y'all have done a 180. We have all done a 180. We're like, oh shit, we matter. Like, we matter too much. And, you know, I think, but before the media was very much like, I likened it to a neighbor watching a kid tie like a gerbil to a bottle rocket and just not intervening. 'Cause like, you kind of wanted to see how high it's gonna go. And turns
Sorry, who's
out,
the gerbil in the metaphor? I got it.
like the media was just a bystander, you know, and it's like, yeah, well, they're doing it, here we go. And it's the Oval Office, all right.
There was that Onion story that was like a op-ed by Trump. Obviously, the Onion is fake. You don't know. Some people don't know that. And the op-ed was like, admit it, you want to see how far this can go. Yeah. And I read that story like once a month. I'm like,
Right.
We're good.
And I think the same is true, though, is that like for news media is not, just as we did a 180 before and after the election, I think we should be cautious to overly focus on Trump. He's so easy to make fun of. This entire administration is easy to make fun of. But what about the actual issues, the local politicians, all the things that are being ignored? And I think like we have a huge responsibility to do that. And also the people. I mean, I'm gonna keep talking because you're not cutting me off. So anyway.
It leads into my next question, so it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, I agree with you that that people took him like a joke, right? But I also think that if you really want to look at it, I think that people took him too seriously. I think the news media took Trump way too seriously. They kept on trying to overcorrect. I think we overcorrected back and forth, back and forth. And I mean, a perfect example is that, like, we would take him at face value. So, the wall. Oh my God, the wall. And suddenly you can say the most outlandish thing and get serious coverage. He could have said, I want to build a wall on the US-Mexico border out of Mexicans. And people would have been like, ah.
A controversial position today from Donald Trump.
Thank you. Thanks for stealing my.
So it's unconventional, but he's an outsider. He's going to shake things up.
How's he going to stick them together? Let's see how this works out. And it's like, no. And meanwhile, and I'm sorry, but meanwhile, you've got Bernie Sanders saying Medicare for all, and people are like, oh my God, this guy. Crazy loon. You know, and that's the thing is, like, because Trump is a safe story, and that's the danger. Trump is actually a really safe story because he's safe for business. He's super pro-corporate, and for a lot of our bosses, he's safer. And the Sanders campaign, or talking about Medicare for all, that stuff is not safe because that is an immediate affront to, sort of a, corporate-driven media model. Super funny.
There you go. Yeah.
Anyway.
Do you have a natural segue now?
Yeah. Well.
Applause break.
Welcome.
Francesca's winning.
So it's not. It's not all about Trump. Full Frontal and NewsBroke, you guys in particular have done really great issue-based comedy/journalism where you do a whole episode about abortion or women's access to
Did we do a whole
reproductive
episode
health.
about abortion that sounds like us?
Yes.
Multiple.
The one that you did was about addressing white privilege, which did like 30 million views on Facebook. It was great. It obviously resonated with people. So what value do you think you're adding where you're actually combining your comedy writing with real reporting and journalism, sending people out into the field?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we try not to think about it, especially for the part that I do, which is like writing the studio segments, basically like Sam's monologues. Sometimes we're covering something really obscure, but we try not to come at it from a perspective of like educating people. We expect that our audience follows the news and probably has seen whatever terrifying shit happened that day, and we just want to make them laugh. So. Yeah, we try not to think of ourselves too much as like providing information. I think our field department does a bit more of that. They've done some incredible stories. One of our field producers found a Russian troll farm and went to Russia and interviewed them before the election.
It seems like a nothing story.
Has no relevance today.
Did you know they had farms before then?
I don't think anybody knew.
No.
I think, our amazing producer, her name's Roseanne Galliani, just like somehow found these people.
All right, so let's talk about process. We are living in this insane, fast-moving news cycle where probably by the end of this panel, something will have happened or Trump will have tweeted something.
Good idea.
I stepped away for a half-hour coffee meeting one day and Scaramucci finished his 10-day tenure. It's just every day somebody is resigning, or there's a new development in the Russia investigation, or something is heating up, or Rex Tillerson may or may not have called the president a moron, or then refuses to admit it. So how do you deal when you're producing a show or working on a show 4 days a week, and you guys are both once a week? How do you make sure what you're working on doesn't become totally irrelevant 2 days later? Like, what is that process like?
Not always well. We had a whole like bit planned, and our art department was working on it for a really long time. And then, suffice to say, there is a Sean Spicer puppet that is beautiful that will never be used.
Oh, you should send that to me. I would love to see that.
It's great.
There was a week where every day at 5 p.m. there was a breaking news story.
Yes.
I'm sure you're all familiar with this.
I think that lasted like 3 weeks.
Yeah, it became like a meme. It was like, oh, it's 5:45. What's gonna break? And then something broke. I think around that time it was like when Trump fired Comey. And when something that big happens, like it changes the whole show. kind of like the way Trump winning blows up the Hillary show.
Yeah.
But when it happens like every day that's nuts.
Yeah.
But I mean, you people work in news, like there's breaking news and you just you do it.
Yeah,
so.
it's a new kind of news cycle, but I think we're all starting to get used to it. Also, like, so much shit happens that, like, it just changes the level of what qualifies as a story that we bother covering. Like, I don't know, Rex Tillerson might get fired this weekend. I don't know if we're gonna cover it in this week's show.
Right. No, we did a piece that was released yesterday about just ways to solve gun violence without gun control. Anything like, zigzag sidewalks, like, I don't know, like any horribly insensitive solution, because that's sort of what we're being asked to do by, the media, or Fox, really. But we had to, stop down and have a whole like slate with elevator music come up, like, since the recording of this video, the NRA has found it in the goodness of their hearts, to talk about whatever it was, the
Bump stocks.
Bump stocks, exactly.
But
So,
anyway. Yeah, we
But
were
in the
right
same
about
breath,
that, but then there was another update.
right, yes. So I think it's hard, but I do think, if you're doing stuff for the web like we do, sometimes we'll record different intros, little snippets, having an awesome post-production team that can do that. We're a tiny little team. There's just 4 of us. So it's not easy, but it's also, what is that added value? What are you explaining? I think if you're talking about, the media and covering of climate change, can we finally say the C word, the climate change word? Like, that is
Why isn't it global warming, by the way? It's global warming. We had to change it to climate change because there's a bunch of idiots who are like, well, it's February and
because
I'm cold,
snowballs,
it can't
exactly.
be warming.
Yeah, because snowballs.
It's because snowballs. No, but I mean, it's like, how can this still be relevant? How can this have a shelf life? And then resigning yourself to the fact that you're not gonna always be on that news cycle. And then killing all your babies, as they say in comedy, right? Just every joke that you wrote about Scaramucci, all the ways you're looking forward to having an Italian-American represented, it's gone. It's gone.
Is it also a challenge, or how often do you find yourself not able to write anything or come up with anything that is more absurd than something that President Trump or an administration official says or does? And then at those times, you kind of just like run the tape. I think you guys did this with your recent Puerto Rico episode, where Sam teed it up by just saying his visit to Puerto Rico was just one big, it was like a big brag fest. And you just played the tape of him bragging about what a great job they'd been doing in the recovery. Like, how often is that happening, or how are you working around that?
I mean, I think that's fine for a comedy show. If the thing that actually happened is funnier than any joke, we just show the thing that happened.
Trump is sometimes a genuinely, like, it's Rubio! Like, that was one of the funniest things that I've ever seen Trump do.
Oh,
Like, looking at the eclipse, like,
He is a born entertainer.
yeah. He kind of knows what he's doing.
Yeah, one of the other
With the
writers,
stupid stuff.
my friend Ashley has this whole theory that if someone had just given Trump a sitcom in like 2009, it would be in its 8th season and we'd all love it, and Hillary Clinton would be president.
He had that show. It was called The Apprentice, damn it. Why?
So filter bubbles are a real thing. I think both comedy and also news organizations, we're all guilty of this, whether it's intentional or not. And sitting here on this stage and in general, there's a lot of articles that have been written that satire is still the domain of progressives. There aren't a lot of conservative satirical shows out there. So, what is your response to that? What's your take to that criticism? Why do you think that is?
It doesn't seem like my problem. Like, if conservatives want to have a satire show, they can
Go for it.
They can make one, and more power to them.
It's also, there's a difference between conservatives and Trump people.
Yes.
So I wouldn't like expect Trump people to do something like that. It just doesn't seem like what they're interested in, It's like to have like a late night show. I could definitely see a conservative one if there's interest in that.
Right. Well, what do you see as the differences?
Between conservative and Trump?
Yeah.
I mean,
Go on, elaborate.
no, there's like the real principled conservatives and like your Romney Republicans even fall into that group, people who were never Trumpers but in the Republican Party. And then there's the rest of people who are like, yeah, like make America great again, like people who don't really get it. I just think they're very different groups.
Right.
And yeah, okay, I'll stop.
I mean, I think what's conservative, you can go to any comedy club and hear some pretty, some backwards stereotypical jokes, and they mostly all punch down, as the phrase is, right? And Trump does that all the time, right? He punches down always. He makes fun of the vulnerable. He makes fun of the disabled. He makes fun of immigrants. He makes fun of everybody, right? And so like, if you want to find conservative humor, that's what conservative humor is. It's just making fun of people who are like, have fewer defenses. Hilarious stuff, by the way. Let me tell you about Asian drivers. But here's the thing, though, is that like they tried. I don't know if you guys saw Jesse Waters. Do you know Jesse Waters?
Oh, the
on Fox
Chinatown
News?
segment.
He went to Chinatown and was like, "What's your name? What's your last name? Wu." That's not funny.
He got
like,
promoted for doing that. He has his own show now.
He's sticking it to Chinatowns around the nation. Like, what are you doing, either comedically or journalistically? It's nothing. It's again just punching down. And
That's true. If the conservative like humor sphere is Jesse Waters videos, it's just like quickly cut clips of '90s movies after every interview he does.
And the other thing
Do you
that
guys watch
it is,
Jesse Waters? Do you know who that is?
I think it's also just like, it's hard to, like, there definitely are principled conservatives. I think it's harder to encapsulate the conservative worldview in a comedic way. Because there's some
so
like
dark.
Well, I'm practicing being objective here.
Read the room. But wait, because you can be, and like the Democrats are a mess. They suck.
Oh yeah, Democrats are very
So
easy to make fun of.
there's a lot of very, very easy. What was their slogan?
I mean,
a better deal, or like
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Have you seen the other guy?
NewsBroke
we'll have to do
did-
20 minutes on that.
Exactly. So we should make that point that all of your shows, and now this as well, do take the opportunity.
Yeah, but when
that is there.
but there's bigger fish than like,
Right.
wow, Chuck Schumer really
Yeah.
made a stupid comment.
I read some quote from Bob Dole once who said like a conservative is a liberal who knows that a conservative is someone who wants all the nice things liberals want but knows we can't afford them. Like that is just a hard, like a lot of principled people believe that, but that is a really hard thing to encapsulate comedically, I think, without getting mean, like you said.
So Melinda, you kind of already answered this question, but going back to the filter bubble idea, do you feel like we are then alienating a part of the country who, like, significantly did vote for Trump?
Oh, I don't care.
Okay, well, there you go. Is there any discussion, Francesca or Matt, in your writers' rooms about reaching out to those people, or, I don't know?
Do they consume like information the way that we do?
Well, from The Daily Show.
Right.
But like, is there any concerted effort, or you guys are just like, it's not our
This
thing?
is where the journalism comes in, and I think both The Daily Show and Full Frontal have researchers on your teams, and like and the work that goes into it. Like, you're proving a point. It's not just, I think, Trevor and Sam and NewsBroke, we're not just sort of throwing people under the bus to do it or making fun of how Ted Cruz looks like he always has like hatchlings in his mouth. But he does, but his policies, so I think it's also, you want to build the argument. And I think, like any good piece of journalism, it's got to be, I call us fact-based bias. We're proudly fact-based bias, and I think if we're not laying out an argument that convinces you, I don't want to speak to the choir, but like the people on the outside of the choir who are like, why are they singing? Like those people. Like I do want it to be a little more accessible, but I think it is about building your argument. I will just say though that the right wing also does have comedy in the form of memes and trolling and the online world that we saw on display in Charlottesville and people who got Trump elected, and they think they're really funny when they tweet images of gas chambers. And when you call them on it, like, how could you joke about this? Or how could you do this? They say, oh, I was just joking. Oh, it's just a joke. And somehow that makes it all okay. I don't know if you've ever, gotten into any kind of flame war on Twitter, anyone? With some alt-writer, but that's what it is. It's like, you can't take a joke. It's just your PC culture that says genocide is bad.
Have you seen like the right-wing memes, by the way? They're
Yeah.
so funny. Like the Sheriff David Clark memes are so hilarious. They're like in 7 fonts and cursive, which is like everyone knows
It's
you
like
do
ransom
like block
cutouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like 5 different pictures and then like a weird logo, like a star. They're so complicated. And my favorite are the ones that's like a block quote and it's like 400 words and the font is like this big. But like these are all over the right wing and they get like thousands of retweets.
That's a good point.
It's not a
actually,
meme.
that
How do they
is
not know
kind
how
of
to
one
meme
version
right?
Of their comedy are the memes.
Yeah.
It's
Just
true.
learn how to meme. That's how you
It's
get.
also like, our show has a pretty liberal bent, but that's just like, comedy is point of view driven, not balance driven. Like, we pick things that we feel passionate about and make jokes about them. If we felt passionate about something that was, skewed more right wing than left wing, we would make that thing. Doesn't happen that often with our particular staff. I think it's also honestly just a personnel thing. Like, so many late night political shows spun off from The Daily Show, that's just like where that's where the talent who's been doing it for 10 to 15 years is. So if a conservative comic wanted to start their show, there's probably a market for that. They would be starting from scratch in terms of talent in a lot of ways.
Are you
So it's
saying
just
there should be
harder.
affirmative action for conservative writers? Like that every newsroom should have just one person being like, but Mexicans are rapists.
They've been kept down for too long.
Yeah, they have. Just one Trump supporter on every writer's room? That'd be amazing.
I mean, it'd be fascinating. Just put the camera in there, and I'd love to hear those conversations.
No one would last more than 5 minutes.
So I came of age politically and editorially during the Bush years, where Jon Stewart saw, his rise to superstardom. And I think, again, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the panel, he was able to do that and have such success because of the cable news, which they have made progress since then. We should shout out progress when it's done. But the whole both sides, we have to give fair and equal coverage to both sides. He was able to call out all of that bullshit during the Bush years because we don't want to fall into the category of rehabilitating Bush. There's a whole op-ed about this on Now This. You can look it up. But Bush was also a liar. There was actually, the Center for Public Integrity did a study that said they lied 935 times in the lead up to the war in Iraq. So while some people might be tempted to look at that time and say, oh, it was so much better then than it is now, not necessarily true, different in a lot of ways, not necessarily true. But what Jon Stewart would say is the shows that he produced during that time, he would find catharsis in processing the news of the day and calling out what he saw as the bullshit, both on Fox, but also on MSNBC sometimes too. So do you guys feel that catharsis in your daily process or weekly process?
Probably a
Like,
little.
do we feel it personally?
Yeah.
You know what the bullshit is now is like after I forget who it was, but after Trump's joint address to Congress, and they were like, in that moment he became president.
Even Van Jones
was it
said
Van
it.
Jones? It was
Van
Van Jones.
Jones said it,
Van
yes.
Jones, 9/11 truther Van Jones said that Trump became president in that moment, and that became a joke. And it was like, who's going to be the next Van Jones? And like this is such a joke that everyone kind of knows it's a joke, but people still do it. Why are they doing it? Either people are tweeting like after Trump's Afghanistan speech, that was very presidential. Like that's a joke to say that. I'm just amazed that people still do that. And that's not on Fox.
It's everywhere, but I think we were kind of talking about this before the panel. There is a need, which I think we can kind of all understand to a degree, to normalize this administration, or it's kind of a coping mechanism.
A need by the media.
Yeah, for journalists to feel some sense of normalcy or some way to get through their day and keep doing their job. And I think for some people, that is the way to do it, by looking for like the glimpses of
the
presidential...
media. Sorry. Go ahead.
No,
yeah,
that's
the
it.
media has not caught up to Trump. Like the new Trump reality is he can lie about anything. He can say incredible offensive things, and the media still has to cover it in the way that they covered things during the Obama years, which is binary. And even if they're inching a little bit more toward calling Trump out, it's still reserved. And I think Trump wins every time the media plays into that because it gives him the benefit of the doubt. Sarah Sanders is a full-blown liar. Sean Spicer obviously was a huge liar, but the network still took them live every day. And they just let them say anything they want and they broadcast it. And reporters tweet out what they're saying without any qualification that's like, well, Sarah Sanders previously lied about, and Sean Spicer previously lied about everything, but we'll believe him on this one until something comes out that shows that he's wrong. I think that's weird.
And I will say again, credit where it's due. We've seen some news organizations start to call out the really blatant lies. Like even in like the CNN lower thirds, you'll see, Trump said this thing about Japan in parentheses. He did not. So there is some progress being made.
It took a while. I mean, it took quite a while before those chyrons were acceptable, but. It's super cathartic. That's all it is. I mean, for me, I think writing about, writing anything after the Las Vegas massacre was really hard. And I actually kind of hats off to a lot of the news comedy shows, whether it was Kimmel or The Daily Show, because it's okay to be real. It's okay to say what you really feel. And I think at once, all comics will be like, why do you put so much, stock in what we say, and we're just comedians. And I know for the longest time, Stewart would say that The Daily Show was just a comedy show. That's just a comedy show, when people were really getting their news from it. But I think, for better or worse, comics are people who you look to, and these late night shows are people who you look to for some sort of guidance. And I think it's a testament to the fact that we're in a very different moment when you can just kind of stop down and be like, this is awful, and I don't have to make jokes about it. But we want the jokes. At some point, you need to stop being sincere and, start sincerely telling some strong jokes.
I thought there was a weird moment after Trump defended Nazis in Charlottesville that was like, it was not funny. It was really hard to make jokes about that, but it was really easy to be outraged. And outrage is, I loved seeing reporters get upset about that, and they were like, this is crazy that Trump is excusing, he called them very fine people. It's like, yeah, that is really important. That's kind of the most important thing that's happened, is that Nazis murdered a woman, and Trump was like, there were problems on many sides, and and that's gone now, because he looked at the eclipse, and we don't care anymore.
Right.
But it was nice for a week.
I think we have microphones somewhere if people want to start lining up for questions. Or are we going to pass a microphone around? I'm not sure how it's working exactly.
Just yell them out.
Okay, cool. Go ahead. Melinda, did you have anything you wanted to add to the end of that while we wait? Or
Oh, I don't find it that cathartic.
you don't find it that? Well, that was kind of the question. Do you feel that, I don't know, despair?
I used to. I think I go through waves where I'm someone who would be reading the news a lot anyway, and it's better to be able to instead of just writing long screeds on Facebook, I can write down what I actually feel, and then a pretty Canadian lady yells it into your television. But it goes through waves. I think I know writers on The Daily Show go through this. This is part of why you have a writing staff instead of one or two writers, is sometimes you're you're ready to pour yourself into the work, and sometimes it kind of gets too real. I actually had a lot of trouble the last couple of weeks. Las Vegas was really hard. Gun stuff is always really hard for me. Orlando was our first big mass shooting on our show, and writing that one was super hard for me. I was really upset. It was hard for me to work, but I did it, and I was really, really proud of the show we did. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is really cathartic for me. And then the next one happened, and I realized oh, we just have to do this forever. So everyone kind of goes through these cycles, and luckily there are enough of us that no one is usually in the exact same place at the cycle, so we can sort of shore up for each other when we need to.
That's right. And that was the conversation we had in our newsroom as well, where it's another symptom or signal of the terrible time that we live in news-wise, because you can kind of mark your career or mark your time in a newsroom or a writer's room by how many mass shootings you've covered. And that is a very dark thing. So with that, we'll take an audience question.
Thank you so much.
Lighten the mood.
Who would have thought we could laugh at an ONA conference, usually pretty bleak for journalists and the future of media. So thank you for this moment. A question in terms of traditionally the liberal-minded media, Comedy Central or CNN, were domestic companies, and now increasingly you have these platforms that offer satire and are really competing, like AJ Plus or Russia Today. And I went to Russia Today daily show. It was great stuff. Then you talk to them at the end. Do you worry about advertising? No, we get the money from Moscow. Al Jazeera, for example, is funded by Qatar, a petromonarchy that has an agenda in the world, like any country. So I wonder, as a journalist, how do you have to factor in the fact that you are, making a trade-off, being probably talking, talking about gun violence in America, which is great. At the same time, receiving funding from a country that shipped guns to a war zone, Syria. Do you need to factor that, or do you not consider yourself journalist is outrage first, which is fine, but you're also throwing words like newsroom, journalism, etc. And for us at ONA, the URL for ONA is ujournalist.org. So I just wonder to what extent outrage first, who cares, what the funding comes from, or you have questions about the ethic of journalism when it comes to funding?
I think that question is about, to me. Okay, I think I understood the question. So is it funny because it's coming from Al Jazeera? I don't know, you gotta watch it, and you tell me if it's funny or not. But no, I mean, I think of course it's important to know where your news is coming from, and it's important to know who's reporting it. And Al Jazeera is an international news organization that is award-winning and does unreported stories around the globe. And it only further strengthens, I think, my brand and AJ Plus's brand that we are associated with it. We don't have someone who's putting an editorial line on us. We don't have people reading our scripts who live in Qatar and are sort of like secretly in bunkers, like poring over my YouTube comments. It doesn't happen. That being said, of course, you should always look and I think Russia Today in the US is not playing a positive role in our democracy right now. I'm just gonna put that out there. So I think it's important to know where stuff is coming from, and I'm glad that AJ Plus does not have that problem, is not compromised in that way.
Another question here, great.
Hi, big fan of all your shows. Great t-shirt.
Horchata Armada?
Yeah.
Shop.horchataarmada.com.
Nice.
It reroutes you through Qatar, and then you come back to the US.
My question is more a behind-the-scenes question. As comedy shows increasingly become a source of news for a lot of people, do you guys feel any pressure or a certain degree of responsibility? Because obviously, like you're saying, you're fact-based, biased. Do you feel any pressure or responsibility to apply journalistic standards to your shows and to your writing beyond just the standard fact check? Like just making sure that things are accurate, but just go beyond that extra step at all? Thank you.
I think
of course.
We definitely work really hard, and we have an amazing research team to make sure everything we say in the show is accurate. We don't want to say anything that's not true, but we cannot provide balanced coverage because we're actually not a news show. We depend on news shows. We watch the news all day. That's how we know what to write about.
We're here because of you.
Yeah, give yourselves a hand.
Seriously.
They did it.
We didn't have that question, but I meant to shout everyone out.
They barely did it. They're very hungover.
But I would like to know, because as you brought up earlier, Jon Stewart would say at the time, oh, we're not a news show, and he would kind of maybe rebuff people who tried to tell him how many young people got their news from his show. Do you feel like that's changed, and people in the Daily Show writers' room now are like, oh yeah, we know how important we are?
Well, I mean, we don't have teams of journalists going out to report original news, but I think the question was do we feel a sense of
responsibility?
Being accurate, of course. I think everything we say, everything you say is true. Except for the obvious, Steve Bannon doesn't actually have dinosaur wings coming out of his neck, so that's you don't believe that, but everything that we present is true, and yeah, it's done on the backs of journalists like you who get the actual news, and then we read it or watch it, and then do the treatment.
I mean, I think we're aware that like some people do get news from our shows, but what you said of like, are we aware of how important we are? That would be the death of comedy.
Right.
Like,
Time to present the news tonight with jokes.
and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And
News is important.
news is important. There was a show, you might have heard of it, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. They actually hired away journalists from ProPublica. Like, they put real investigative reporters and researchers on their staff.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different because they do these weekly deep dives, but they are going deep to get this verified information and present it in that way and be able to back it up.
You probably shouldn't just get your news from comedy shows, I guess.
Please don't.
I think we can all agree you
weird.
should diversify your sources, have more than one, whatever.
But that's such a perfect example. I mean, John Oliver's crushing it, and that entire team has been crushing it, from the writers on down to the researchers, and that's a perfect example of added value, and teaching and learning about something, doing their own reporting, and then adding, just peppering in the jokes on top. And I think it works, and it's a winning combo, and I think it's a testament to the strength of everyone in this room and places that you work and the investigations you're doing, that comedians can even have these stories to report on.
Yeah, we can't do what you guys do. Like, we don't have the capacity or the knowledge or the bravery to go out and investigate things.
Definitely not the bravery.
Yeah, we read a lot of ProPublica articles and watch a lot of cable news.
And local news
And
reporting
local news is
also-
amazing.
We have just a couple minutes left. Do we have some more questions? We have one in front here. Can we get a microphone up front? Oh, we've got one in the back already. Okay.
Okay. Hi. So there's news comedy and then there's news companies. And I'm curious about, I think a lot of people in here are probably interested in incorporating satire into podcasts, newsletters, other types of programming like that. So my question is, what examples are there of news companies doing satire well, news companies? And what makes them stand out to you? What can we learn from them? I know NewsBroke comes from a news company.
I think Alex Petrie at the Washington Post is hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
She is. Yes. She's great.
Yeah, I think that's an example of what you said, like to do it well, hire people who are really funny and they'll do it well.
Yeah.
Is that a media company? I don't know.
I think that counts.
You guys do some jokey stuff
we do
over
we
at
do some
Now
jokey
This.
stuff at Now This. That's right. Definitely check us out on Facebook if you haven't yet. But HuffPost Hill is a really good example of a very, very funny newsletter that is also chock full of facts and original reporting.
BuzzFeed does some good comedy stuff.
Yeah. They have a new Twitter morning show that I think incorporates a little bit of comedy, culture, reporting. So there are a good number of news organizations out there that are branching out into it, but those are the specifics.
The BuzzFeed or the Twitter morning show is interesting to me. I've watched it like 2 or 3 times, and I think it's very cool that they're doing it. I'm still trying to understand like what it kind of is, and I think they are too. But it's very cool to see like a show that exists on like my preferred platform.
Yes, many journalists' preferred platform, but also they have the best name ever, From AM to DM. That is just a brilliant name for a Twitter morning show. It's brilliant.
I think morning shows on television are really bad, and like there's like 9 minutes of news, and then it's like people throwing fruit at each other and weird like animal segments, and
But
I
now
don't know.
there's
it's
Megyn
just-
Kelly.
Hey,
Oh.
Megyn Kelly's show
So
is
bright-
amazing to watch. That's all
Bright
I'll
in your
say about that.
morning.
It was actually a Washington Post headline that I think called it a Bride of Frankenstein
Yeah.
morning show. So
The reviews have been not great.
got one over here.
Hi. I have a question for Melinda and Francesca. Given the political satire sort of world, it's kind of male dominated, and both of you working on sort of a female host show, what were some of the challenges and criticisms that you have faced, and possibly any opportunities as well?
I'll take this one, I think.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
So it's very exciting to be working on a female-driven show. Having come up through the comedy world, pretty much every writing room I've ever been in has been male-dominated, and that kind of messes with you in ways you don't even understand. me and my friend Ashley, who's my office mate and one of the other writers, we've talked about how like we feel kind of like Kenyan marathon runners who trained at altitude our whole lives, and then all of a sudden we're at sea level, and we're like, this is so easy now. Yeah, like, I mean, I've worked with amazing men. I haven't, you know.
Some are decent people.
And some, I'm sure, are good people. But it's great just in terms of a sensibility. It really makes a difference to all of a sudden be around people who get your Gilmore Girls jokes. Or at least trust you enough that they're funny that they'll put them in the show.
I mean, yeah, I think, I love the way also Sam B just leans into a lot of the trolling that she'll get. So openly reading all of the nasty comments online, which I feel like she's forced to do that by the rest of the staff who's like, gonna be there for her. Because it's hard, you know, it's hard to be a woman online, and for sure there's fewer opportunities than I think there's openings. Especially when you're a woman online talking about politics, it's just like a trifecta. You're trying to tell a joke, you're trying to have some sort of political analysis. I mean, what else could be working against me? And so, it's gross. Like, it's gross out there. But I think, just like anyone who's trying to build an audience online, having amazing community managers, having people who are like, you know, filtering out the C word and the B word and all the other words, and creating like it's possible, I think, to create a healthy online community that is supportive, and I have faith that we can somehow. But yeah, I love this approach of just going for it, just like battle axe to all the trolls. Is that the battle axe, or is this? I don't know what this thing is, but this is something medieval.
One more question in the back. Yeah.
Hi.
I want to get you. They're not bringing a microphone. I'm sorry.
My question is, how does the world of sort of instant feedback affect like the writing staffs? And what I mean by that is, for example, with The Daily Show, when Trevor Noah had Tommy Lauren on, at first it was, oh, this is so great, they're having an honest conversation. And then all of a sudden there was this huge controversy about normalizing conservatives, et cetera, and that's all happening because you have Twitter and you have blogs and you have so much online discussion after you do your features.
I love that conservatives are so evil that we're normalizing them. That's so funny.
Well, Tommy, she's a special brand.
Yeah, she's out there,
She's
man.
a special brand. I've been on a panel with her. She called me racist.
What's the
did?
concern?
Oh my gosh, that's like a badge
Can we
of
stop
honor.
taking questions and talk about
Yeah.
That's really
what was
weird.
her
Racist
hair
against
like?
who?
White people?
people? Nice. That's great. That's a classic. That's a Tommy
Reverse
classic.
racism.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around. I haven't thought much about that topic, I guess. I feel like it's good to have those people on the show because you can call them out on their crap, and it's not really normalizing unless you like give them the platform, and I don't think we did that, but I don't know.
Well, the instant feedback question is also interesting because there have actually been, I don't think it was you, but there were tweets from some Daily Show staff that were considered offensive, and people got on the case, and you guys had to delete and apologize. So I guess just like, what's that discussion like?
I don't know.
You know? Oh, sorry. I don't remember what the actual
He
tweet
deleted
was.
them. It never happened.
We're
Yeah,
gone.
we don't talk about them because we deleted them.
But
It didn't happen.
The instant feedback is not pressure. You kind
I
of
don't really think about it that much. I used to read more of like our press and our mentions, and I just kind of stopped after a while. It's you know, it can be like you don't know what you're wandering into. One of my fellow writers wrote a really funny joke once, and I like wanted to see if it had gotten any play in the media, so I Googled it, and it just took me to like an alt-right Nazi board, where they were like, "See, she does have Jews working on her staff."
Got to get both sides.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mostly just steer clear of it. I think the digital team has to, you know, they sometimes have sort of like 1,000-yard stares because they have to deal with the barrage of it all day.
Yeah. All right, let me take the last question from this girl in the front row because she's been trying, so.
You can't.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say thank you for telling everyone here to hire comedians because I'm a journalism student that's been trying to be taken seriously for my comedy like my whole college career, so thank you. But for somebody who is like trying to go into this field that seems like there's no real direct trajectory, like news is really hard to get into, comedy's even harder to get into. Like, what advice do you have, especially for Francesca? Like, how did you get hired at how did you get a news organization to take you seriously and to actually let you do your job?
You trick them. Simple. Trick them. No, really, you trick them. It is for sure. It's super hard, but I do think it's, like I was saying, and if you want to make a break to actually do comedy, do it right. As we launched a year ago, convinced AJ+, convinced them this was worth it, convinced them it would be a fun outlet and important. Go all in on it, and hire those writers. But you can also, and I think coming from the internet where it's a lot about like the host and hey, and I'm gonna talk to you really close and and like it's annoying, but it works. And I think there can be a slide from that host, like myself, who was that, into, hey, what if we just made this more deliberate and just wrote jokes? And in fact, I think it's even more honest, because rather than sort of being super laced with irony, you're like, no, this is a joke, and the gloves are off, it can be editorial. So carving out that space for yourself when it doesn't exist, and finding amazing people to surround yourself with, shout out to the NewsBroke team, and watching at home. I don't know what else. Melinda?
Join your college improv team, do stand-up whenever you can, make videos whenever you can, submit to McSweeney's and Rejectress and The New Yorker. The great thing about comedy is you don't have to wait. You don't have to have a degree. You can start doing it right now. It'll probably take a while. You'll be poor for a while if that's really what you want to do. But the more you do it, you don't know like what's going to break through. Like things can just sort of like change suddenly. Like you'll write something that people will really latch onto, and then people will start paying you to do it.
I think you just got to make stuff. You just always be making stuff.
Always be making
and
stuff.
know that like 80% of it won't do well, or like you won't get the validation you want.
Yeah.
But it's not about that part. It's about the 20% or the 5% or the 1%, whatever it is. Make videos, make tweets, make weird Photoshop things. Like put everything you can on social media and don't worry about what people say. Yeah. And if you get a really good one in there, people will see it.
I think audience engagement is also always going to be what news organizations or whoever you're pitching to wants to hear, and I think these three shows are a great example of how you can do both comedy and news and have an incredibly engaged audience. That's what people want. On a closing note, I want to talk about your bit about how many days it's been since Trump has answered this question.
Has not answered this question.
Just put it out to this room full of journalists so they follow it.
I want all of you to go forward. Yes, okay, on July 25th, I didn't know she was going to ask about this, but I literally am obsessed with this. On July 25th, 2017, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, did a press conference with the Prime Minister of Lebanon, and Trump was asked about Hezbollah sanctions because Congress was considering a bill on it, and Trump had no idea what Hezbollah was. Hezbollah is a political party in Lebanon that the United States and others classifies as a terrorist organization. It's obviously very important to the Middle East and whatever, other things. Trump's answer was, I'm going to have a meeting with my very top expert military representatives, and I'll be making that clear over the next 24 hours. And then the reporter followed up, and she was like, what about Hezbollah's role in the region? And he was like, whose role? And she's like, Hezbollah. And he's like, we'll be making that clear within 24 hours. It never happened. 24 hours went by, nothing. 48 hours. Today is the 74th day since, no, I'm not joking. Don't laugh. This is serious.
He tweets about this every single day.
Because people need to know, and I can't get them to ask about it, but
so if you have the opportunity.
Someone out there, a guardian angel, take this question.
But when he figures out what it is, first it's how to pronounce it. Just like Guam. Like when he realized Guam was like an actual
like
territory.
Hezbollah,
like
whatever it is.
Guam.
It'll be
and
a
then
super
Guam,
cut,
when you take care of Guam. Like he'll just say it all
Antifa.
over and over. Yeah, Antifa. Hezbollah.
Yeah. He's going to undo the thing because it has Obama's name on it. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Same point, yeah. Iran.
Iran.
All right.
Iran like an Apple product?
That's very Iran, yeah.
On that note, let's all go get drinks and do our best Trump impressions.
Great job,
And
Versha.
Thank you to this panel. Thank
Great for Versha.
Anyway, if any of you know what Hope Hicks's deal is, I'm dying to know.
What? Oh, Pixie.
Yeah.
That is a good one.
What is she?
Oh, she's a model.